Welcome back to the First Gnostic Church of Christ. We are on video number 7, picking up on verse number 61, the Gospel of Thomas. In our last video, we talked about the nature of this ram called the konoma. In modern times, we like to call it the matrix. And the nature, ultimately, for those that come to understand their worthiness to receive Christ's true message, is one of death, or as Christ calls, a carcass. And when one realizes that this ram is a carcass, one then also understands that, contrary to what one has been told by the Orthodox Church and all the many religions of the world, that you're not worthy, it's in fact this ram that's not worthy of you. You are a son and daughter of God. You are the essence of God. You are children of God in spirit. Therefore, you are worthy to receive the good news that Christ has come to bring you Gnosis, so that you may be liberated from this ram called the konoma and be freed to go to your original home, known as the pleroma. And I do encourage you to listen to the Secret Book of John series if you want to understand the different rams of the pleroma, starting at the 8th ram going up. Now let's continue our reading. Now Christ here continues talking about what makes us worthy to receive the Christ. In verse 61, Christ says, Jesus said, 2 will recline on a couch. One will die, one will live. What is it about this idea of reclining on a couch that's significant here? Clearly, the couch doesn't make a difference in terms of the outcome of these 2 individuals. They're on the same couch. One dies, the other lives. Why is that? Reclining on the couch is paralleling the experience of being at rest, not in labor, not in stress, but being at rest, meaning that what you do in this ram is not going to result in you being able to work toward the outcome of whether you live or die. This is why Christ is talking about reclining on a couch. He's saying that these 2 people have never contributed in any way to the law, haven't tried to work themselves into heaven. In fact, they're just lying on a couch, reclining on a couch, no effort being made. And yet, one dies and the other lives. So it's of no account of their own effort that results in the different outcomes. So what does result in the different outcomes if we can't work ourselves into heaven by what we do or don't do, in the sense of following a law, set of laws, whether it's the 10 Commandments or the Levitical law, or whatever the church tells you is right or wrong to do? If those are not the things, whether you follow them or not, that results in the outcome of death or life, then what does? And this is what Jesus is going to explain to the individual that he's speaking to. Salome said, "Who are you, mister? You have climbed onto my couch and eaten from my table as if you are from someone." So what Salome is saying here is that, what gives you the right to come here and sit on my couch and eat from my table? Now, many things are going on here on so many different levels. Because remember, Christ came in and said, 2 will recline on a couch. So he's talking in a very broad way about everyone on this planet throughout time. But he's also talking directly to Salome. So obviously he's referring to Christ is the one that's going to live, but Salome will not live. Now, for you to appreciate why this is and why Christ can be so forthright in saying this to Salome, you have to understand who this person is, Salome. And for that, we have to go into the canonical text. Some of you may already know who Salome is. Others of you may not. According to 10 verses in Matthew 14, John was imprisoned for criticizing King Herod Antipas's marriage to Herodotus, the former wife of Antipas's half-brother Herod II. Herod offered his niece a reward for her choice for performing a dance for his guests on his birthday. Herodotus persuaded her daughter, Salome, to ask for John the Baptist's head on a platter. Against his better judgment, Herod reluctantly acceded to her request. So Salome is the stepdaughter of Herod, who ordered John the Baptist's head to be removed. This was because his stepdaughter was dancing for him on his birthday, performing a dance called the 7 Veils Dance. Now, the 7 Veils Dance refers to the 7 astrological planets, or the 7 luminaries by which the demiurge works, the 7 inner planets, which in astrology are the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Now, the 7th planet is what's significant here, because that's the planet of Satan. Saturn is the planet of Satan, from which we get Saturday, or Saturn's Day, or Satan's Day, also called Day of Sabbath, which Saturday is named after Sabbath, which is named after the planet Saturn. Now, this is the 7 planets that by which she danced, being moved by the spirit of the demiurge to ask for the head of John the Baptist. Now, why is John the Baptist's head being removed? It's significant that his head's being removed because he's not the cornerstone. He is the announcement of the cornerstone. He's to make way for the cornerstone, or the head of the true church, which is, of course, the head of that true church would be Christ. Now let's go back. In addition to what Christ is saying to Salome about there are those that will live and those that will die, it's not the work that you do, whether you follow this law or that law. In fact, if you are at rest, reclining on a couch, you can still die or you can still live. So Christ is saying to Salome this mystery, and Salome, of course, is intrigued by mysteries. She says, "Who are you, mister?" So she senses something. There's something moving in her. Spirit is moving in her, you see. And she's certainly a woman that has great intuition, as you can see. So she says, "Who are you, mister? You have climbed on my couch and eaten from my table as if you are from someone." So in other words, from someone indicating of nobility, because she's of the noble family. So she's curious to find that this person in garments and robes just comes in, sits down, and starts eating at a noble table. Wow, who are you to do this? She's saying. Jesus said to her, "I am the one who comes from what is whole. I was granted from the things of my Father." And instantly, Salome is overwhelmed with this amount of truth coming from Christ. And she says, "I'm your disciple." In that instant, in that moment, despite her past and all the horrific things that she did, requesting to have John the Baptist's head to be removed, of course, it was her mother that intrigued her or persuaded her to do that, to do this type of foul act, request this foul act be done, rather. But she couldn't deny this truth coming from Christ. And you're going to understand why here in a second. She gets it. And so Christ says, "For this reason I say, if one is whole, one will be filled with light. But if one is divided, one will be filled with darkness." Christ doesn't reject her, nor does he accept her. In fact, he allows her to be the one to determine whether or not she is telling the truth to herself. He knows her past. He knows that she's partaken in the dark arts and has resulted in being an accomplice in a very terrible act of having John the Baptist's head removed. But at the same time, he recognizes that there's light in her. Question is, which of these two are going to win, you see? But it's not about division. Her whole self has to be full with light. And how is this brought about? Is it by what we do? Christ has already demonstrated it's not by what we do. Because even Christ doesn't reject Salome, who is the individual who requested John the Baptist's head to be removed, who is considered the greatest in heaven up to that point, according to Christ. So if even Salome could be considered as a potential disciple by Christ, or he allows her to consider that, to come to that conclusion fully, then most of us don't go around requesting others' heads to be removed. Then certainly we can be a disciple of Christ, right? But let's move to 62, and this is going to clarify. Jesus said, "I disclose my mysteries to those who are worthy of my mysteries." Now, what makes you worthy? Let's go back up. The answer is in verse 61. Christ answered this already. The ones that are worthy is, as Jesus said to her, "I am the one who comes from what is whole. I was granted from the things of my Father." Let me read that again. It says, "I was granted from the things of my Father." Those that are worthy to receive Christ in full are those that actually understand they are from the Father. And the Father is the one that grants all things. That is the true Father, Mother, the monad, the Creator, the ineffable, that loves everyone, has already granted everything. The one that understands this mystery, understands that you are already worthy, is what makes you worthy. It's what you believe, you see. That's why it's so important to believe in the message of Christ. When it says that is what makes a difference, if you believe what I say or not. It's not that it's about believing in Jesus, that man, but it's believing in what he is saying to you. You see? That's why believing in Jesus, not the man, but when he talks about believing, he's talking about believing in his message, what he brought. Once you believe that, you understand that you are son and daughter of God, and you are worthy, have always been worthy to receive what was granted from the Father from the beginning. That's the good news that Christ came to bring. I've come to bring you a life of abundance, as he says. But you have to be filled with this light and this understanding. You can't just go half-hearted. You can't believe in this world and what this world is telling you what God is, and then kind of believe in what Christ came to tell you who the true Father is. Because if you're in the middle, then you're divided. And division is of the devil. In fact, they come from the same root word. They'll come from that word double, diablo, devil, divide, division. These are all from the same root word, which is the act of breaking something up into its incomplete parts. So you have to understand that you're full and perfect just the way you were. You are. You were created perfect. And when you understand that, you understand that the true Father doesn't make anything in imperfection, but emanates everything fully and perfectly. And that our goal is to understand what that fullness is. That's our ultimate life mission, is to find our name in this realm, so that when we go back to the pleroma, we're adding that attribute of God back to the pleroma, you see, that was formerly lost. We have to remember it back, remember it back to the full, to the whole, to the unit. This is what the mystery is. And once you understand that, then you are worthy of not only understanding the mystery, but worthy of receiving everything that was granted from the Father from the beginning. You were always worthy. It's just that you didn't know that. You were not conscious of that. You were not awake to that. But once you receive Gnosis, which is the awakening of that truth, then you understand you always were worthy and you always were whole. And that's the way in which you have to understand now. That becomes your truth, not what you were told in the past, that you were not worthy. Now let's continue. Verse 63. Jesus said, "There was a rich person who had a great deal of money. He said, I shall invest my money so that I may sow, reap, plant, and fill my storehouses with produce, that I may lack nothing." These were the things he was thinking in his heart. But that very night he died. Anyone here with 2 ears had better listen. Now remember, I always say this in almost every video. Seek ye the truth, and it shall set you free. If you have attachments, then you're not free. You cannot worship both God and manna. You cannot worship either. They will both be not, you see. Because Christ here is talking about, when he's talking about the rich person, what he's talking about is that person is putting their belief and their faith in something material. And why is he picking on the rich person? Because the rich person that Christ talks about is that person that has more than he needs. So that in the end, it's this obsession with this idea that I can buy security. But that's an illusion, ultimately, because nothing in this realm lasts forever. Everything will be taken away. The only thing that you can take with you is the truth through Gnosis and wisdom. Those are the things you'll take with you. And those are the things that Christ admonishes you to hear and listen to, so that you put your storehouse, the goods in the storehouse of spiritual things, spiritual understanding, so that you grow in that, so you find your release from the things that cause you to have insecurity in the first place. And that is this realm that is constantly parasiting life off of other life in order to live. You see, we all have to go out and kill something and steal life from something else in order to live in this realm. And someone else will come along when you die. Maybe it's animals, it's worms, whatever, bacteria, etc., that will break apart your physical body. This is the nature of this realm, is what Christ is talking about. He's talking about the material things, that this individual has gotten to a point where he's taken more than what's necessary for him to survive off of. Now notice, Christ is not talking about being able to go out and make a good living and have a comfortable life. What he's talking about here is that rich person that goes above and beyond what's necessary and puts all of their sense of self-worth and meaning and security into the idea that if they can collect more and more and more and more, somehow they're going to arrive to this place of eternal happiness, bliss, and eternal existence or security. And that's an illusion. That's not going to happen. Verse 64. Jesus said, "A person was receiving guests when he had prepared the dinner. He sent his slaves to invite the guests. The slave went to the first and said to that one, 'My master invites you.' That one said, 'Some merchants owe me money. They are coming to me tonight. I have to go and give them instructions. Please excuse me from dinner.' The slave went to another and said to that one, 'My master has invited you.' That one said to the slave, 'I have bought a house, and I have been called away for a day. I shall have no time.' The slave went to another and said to that one, 'My master invites you.' That one said to the slave, 'My friend is to be married, and I am to arrange the banquet. I shall not be able to come. Please excuse me from dinner.' The slave went to another person and said to that one, 'My master invites you.' That one said to the slave, 'I have bought an estate, and I am going to collect the money or the rent. I shall not be able to come. Please excuse me. Please excuse me.' The slave returned and said to his master, 'Those whom you invited to dinner have asked to be excused.' The master said to the slave, 'Go out on the streets and bring back whomever you find to have dinner. Buyers and merchants will not enter the places of my Father.'" Now, this is talking about people that never take a time to meditate on spiritual things. They're always obsessed with making more and more money, consuming more and more, bringing up their stature in the world, their reputation, their standard, or obligations, whether it's to go to a banquet, to a friend's marriage, whether it is to buy an estate, to collect taxes, whether it's to make more money or to sell a house or to buy a house. There's always a reason why. They're always making excuses as to why they cannot sit down and consider, what is this world? Is it just this consumption that we partake in? Is it this exchanging, buying things and exchanging things? So Christ is not talking literally about buyers and merchants, if that happens to be your occupation. Maybe you are a salesperson, or maybe you are a marketeer. Christ is not talking literally here. Now, again, I have to remind you that we have thus far gone up to 64 verses, and the vast majority of these are not literal. In fact, this is a metaphor, an allegory to some deeper meaning. So why would we therefore assume that Christ is talking about a literal master and slave? He's making up a story. So why would he then be talking literally about only merchants and buyers that can't enter into the Father's kingdom? Of course he's not doing that. What he's talking about is the process of buying and merchants, that process of economics, that process of consumption, that if we make that our identity, that we think that we are all about either buying goods or selling them, if that's who we have become, that becomes a cornerstone of our identity, then no, you're not going to enter into the place of the Father, because you're not going to prioritize spiritual things. You have no time for it. This is what this verse is talking about. Again, I always remind you not to look at these verses as literal until you get clear evidence that they are in fact literal. Each one of these are sayings that hold great mysteries in them, and we have to understand the way in which Christ is talking. He's talking spiritually, and that's why you have to understand the rest of the Gnostic text to appreciate what he's saying here. That's the beginning of the walk of Gnosis. If you are part of the world where you're always finding excuses as to why you can't meditate, you can't pray, or you can't study spiritual things, or commune with the Christ, or prioritize living the walk of Christ, and here the Master is wanting to invite you, which is the Master, of course, is Christ as well, into his kingdom, and you don't have time for it, which is to walk his walk, that is, give to the poor, help those in need, heal the sick, so forth and so on, all those things he asks you to do. If you don't have time for that, then you're going to see that it's because you're a buyer or a merchant, ultimately, that you don't have time for that. You're only interested in consuming, which is the nature of this realm. Remember earlier I said this realm is the realm of parasites. That's what Christ refers it to, the realm of as a carcass, because it is a carcass. Everything here is only alive because it is siphoning life off of other beings, entities. You see, it's constantly, every one of us are essentially like vampires. We're eating life out of other life, and that includes the animals. Everything in this realm called the konoma is going through that process of consumption, consuming, consumers, buyers and merchants. That's what Christ is talking about. Verse 65, he said, a person owned a vineyard and rented it to some farmers so that they could work it, and he could collect its crop from them. He sent his slave so the farmers would give him the vineyard's crop. They grabbed him, beat him, and almost killed him. And the slave returned and told his master. His master said, perhaps they didn't know, perhaps he didn't know them. He sent another slave. And this, of course, he's saying maybe they thought the slave was lying or something to them, or didn't really know who the slave was. So he sent another slave, and the farmers beat that one as well. Then the master sent his son and said, perhaps they'll show my son some respect, because the farmers knew that he was the heir to the vineyard. They grabbed him and killed him. Anyone here with 2 ears had better listen. What is Christ saying here? He's saying that many have come before him that have brought Gnosis, brought the true Father, but no one accepted it. In fact, it rattled them because they couldn't give up the attachments of this world. And when they finally saw the truth, it rattled them so much they actually killed the son of the true Father. Why would they be so rattled? Christ says it here. Because within themselves they knew he was the heir to the vineyard. The farmers wanted to own this earth. They want to own all these things, but they don't understand that they're not the rightful owners. The rightful owners of everything that you see is the true Father. And it's the true Father, Mother, that grants everything. We don't have to fight over it. We don't have to divide ourselves over it or siphon life off of other entities in order to have it. Christ is telling you that I've already given it to you. All you have to do is live on it. And it says here he owned a vineyard and rented it to some farmers. And this is renting as this earth. You're just here temporarily. He sent his slaves so the farmers would give him the vineyard's crop. So we only have to work the Word of God. This is all God is asking of us, is to be an example, as Christ was an example, to make the Word flesh by putting forth the will of God through work. And the work here is not the things that are going to get you into heaven or not get you into heaven. Remember the story about the two reclining on a couch. But the work is becoming the essence of the true Father, the Christ. And how do you do that? Well, you understand that you're worthy to receive the good news, which is that you're worthy. There's nothing mysterious or paradoxical about that. It's very simple. Everything you've been told prior about that you're worthless and you're scum and that you need to feel pitiful and ashamed of just being a human being because of Adam and Eve, two people you don't even know from 6,000 years ago who were ignorant anyway because they didn't have knowledge, plucked some apple from a tree. This is the bag of goods you've been sold that has wounded you and made you literally, mentally not in a good place, emotionally traumatized. That's the thing that you have to work on, you see, to get to overcome and de-indoctrinate yourself from. And that's your work. And once you do that and you understand you're worthy, then you will receive the good news, which is that you're worthy. And that will grow in you. That Gnosis will grow in you. And the mysteries will start to be revealed to you. The reason they are threatened is because deep down inside they know all of the ones that have come before that are the saints or the Christinos or even the Christ himself are taken out. Whether it's Abraham Lincoln that tried to free the slaves, whether it's Gandhi, whether it's Martin Luther King, whether it's John F. Kennedy that talks about imagine a world where there's no religion, no boundaries, no borders, no wars. See, these are things that this realm cannot accept because they're attached to it. Example would be someone that wants it so badly, they're holding on to it so tightly, and you're trying to take it away from them. Maybe it's like drugs because it's not good for them, and they hate you for it, and they'll do anything to prevent you from taking it from them. They'll even kill you for it because they know that you represent what's good for them, but they're not ready to let go of the fix they get from this addiction, you see. And that's what this realm is, and it's an addiction. We're attached to our desires of this realm, a realm of pride and envy and lust and all those 7 sins, you see, that keeps us here. That's the work that you have to do, is to overcome your attachments to this realm. All right, continuing. Verse 66, Jesus said, "Show me the stone that the builders rejected. That is the key stone." Now this is reminiscent of a verse in Matthew's, or paralleling a verse in Matthew's, and also a verse that Christ talks about in Matthew's, referring to a verse in Psalm. So what is he talking about here? What is this thing called the keystone or the cornerstone? What is that? Show me the stone that the builders rejected. That is the keystone. And who are the builders and why do they reject it? So for this, let's go to the canonical text and flesh this out a little more. And here I am taking from the King James Version of the Bible, and we're in Matthew chapter 21, and we're going to go down to verse number 42. It says, "Jesus saith unto them, Did you never hear or read the scriptures? The stone which the builders rejected, the same is become the head of the corner. This is the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes." Of course, Christ is talking to the Sadducees and Pharisees about Psalm chapter 118. And then it continues, "Therefore say I unto you, the kingdom of God shall be taken from you, and given to a nation bringing forth the fruits thereof." And that nation is the nation of Gentiles. In the end, the Jewish people didn't accept that Christ was in fact the Messiah that was to come, you see. So Christ was informing them that this kingdom of God is being taken from you, because it was the 12 disciples, which were in fact Jewish at the time, that were the first to actually accept the Christ. But ultimately they're going to lose that understanding of the truth, and it'd be given to the Gentiles. So that's what he's saying here. "And whoever shall fall on the stone shall be broken, but on whomever it shall fall, it will grind him to powder." So this is ultimately talking about the incorruptibility, and the power of his message. This is not going to be defeated. In fact, anyone that will come up against it will ultimately fall by the wayside. They're not going to be able to succeed. 45, "And when the chief priests and Pharisees had heard his parables, they perceived that he spake of them." And remember, this is going back to the earlier verses. He talked about the master and the slave, and the farmers that killed the slave, and then ultimately the master, because they can't handle the truth. And his Pharisees knew that what Christ was saying was true. They actually perceived that he spake of them. They knew this deep in their gnosis that was dormant in them, but their minds were not awake. They prevented the gnosis light from coming on because they had too much pride and attachments to this world. Verse 46, "But when they sought to lay hands on him, they feared the multitude because they took him for a prophet." So at least they recognized that at least the crowds thought of Christ as the prophet. So they were not going to touch him at that point. They feared for their lives. And so why am I bringing up this? I'm clarifying what is the substance of what's being said here, is that the builders are those that lay the foundation of this understanding of who God is, which is, in this case, it is the Hebrew, the demiurge, Genesis chapter 1, which is the Elohim, so forth on Jehovah, so forth and so on. And that they laid that foundation, believing that they were the cornerstone, believing that they were the one that had the message, the true message. When in fact they didn't. In fact, they missed the most vital, most important part of the entire apparatus or building. Without it, the entire thing would collapse, and that's the cornerstone. And so what is the cornerstone? The cornerstone, of course, is Christ, right? And his message. Let's take a look. Here's a picture of a cornerstone, or it's also called a keystone. You can see an arch here. This is the cornerstone. It's holding up these two sides. And the reason why it holds up these two sides of the arch is because it's irregularly shaped, and so it holds the pressure on the left side and right side, thereby holding up both sides. There's a nice little write-up that I found on the internet written by John Roland Stahl called "The Stone That the Builders Refused." Did a good job of explaining the importance of the keystone. He's referring to a song written by Bob Marley, Of course, Bob Marley is also taking from what Christ was saying about the stone that the builders refused. Bob Marley says here, the stone that the builders refuse will always be the head cornerstone. Now, that's not exactly what Christ said, but Bob Marley is obviously making his own version of it. So let's start here. It says there is a big difference in the qualities required for the head cornerstone and the keystone of the ark. In general, when a mason is building an edifice of stone, he will be looking for stones that are as perfectly square and straight and regular as it is possible to find, carefully dressed that way from the quarry. As for the head cornerstone, it must be the most perfectly square and straight and regular of all, since all lines and levels will be based upon it. For the rest of the building, the best stones will be wanted, of course, although some stones may be accepted which are not entirely perfect. But when a stone is really not square at all, but is some kind of trapezoid or worse, it will be entirely rejected. This rule applies to the great majority of stones used in construction, but the keystone of the ark is altogether a different story. The ark was of critical importance in medieval stonemasonry construction, as it made possible a whole range of construction features that included windows, doorways, and even major support columns and galleries. The key which made an ark work was a stone at the top center of the ark that was not square. It was wider on the top than on the bottom, so that the pressure of the remaining stones would maintain the shape of the ark from collapsing. Of course, the builder would search among the rejected stones to find some irregular stone that would be suitable for use as the headstone of the ark. Now, taking another look at Bob Marley's song, it's easy to discern his intention. While square and straight and regular may be a useful idea for an orderly society, it is the one that is different from the others that is singled out for the most important and critical position or positions. And that's the ultimate answer here, is that Christ is saying that he is the one that is different from everything else that's been before, and thereby brings about his importance to holding it all together, holding up the entire building or the entire archway or window or whatever you want to call it, doorway. In this instance, Christ is talking on many levels, of course. He's referring to himself as the one that's the keystone that holds up all truth, but he's also suggesting that every one of us are unique and we all hold our truth and we're all integral parts of the whole and all necessary. And this world will want to make you into like all the other square stones, exact same size, replicas, duplicates, to take away your personality and your individuality, telling you have to be exactly like this, else there'll be consequences, or you're a weirdo, or something's wrong with you, or you're not worthy. You see, Christ is saying, no, you were made exactly the way you were supposed to be made. You're perfectly made. You are the Christ. I'm the Christ. I'm within you. Thereby, you are also the keystone, but you will be rejected for it by this world that you're living in, by the vast majority of people. Verse 67, Jesus said, those who know all but are lacking in themselves are utterly lacking. So you can know everything. You can know all the sciences, all the math, all the Bible. You can know it literally from one page, from front and back. You can quote all the quotes, verses of the Bible, but none of that matters if you don't have the light within you. If you don't have what's within you that's unique to you, the keystone that's within you. That's what Christ is talking about. This is becoming even more evident as we continue to read the remaining verses in this video. It's leading up to verse 70, and you're going to see this in a second. But those who know all but are lacking in themselves, didn't say lacking from the understanding of what the world brings you, but your own understanding within yourself are utterly lacking. You can have everything around you, all the things you want to consume in the world, the big nice houses and cars and all the reputation, all the money, all the power, prestige. None of those will matter if they are not authentically from within you. What is your unique contribution? What is the way in which you can give back? Is to love God as you love yourself, all your mind and heart. So you can't love God any more than you can first love yourself. So you have to love yourself fully in order to love God fully. And once you do that, then your contribution comes forth, because your contribution is what is unique about you. See, it's not the things that you do, it is who you are that is of most value to God and to this world. That's why Christ talks about two people that's just reclining on a couch and one dies and the other lives, because it's inconsequential as to the things you work toward or for in this realm according to the proto-orthodox interpretation of how you're supposed to be worthy. Whether you're this race or that race, or this sexuality or that sexuality, male or female, or whether or not you give thousands of dollars to the poor while at the same time doing this or that, or whether or not you eat this type of food or that type of food, whether or not you wear a scarf or don't wear a scarf. None of those things ultimately matter, you see, if they don't really come from the true essence of who you are from the inside. The ultimate gift that you can offer God and yourself and everyone else is the essence of your unique self. But in order to live that out, you have to first understand you're worthy, 100% worthy and perfectly made. You are the cornerstone that holds up this universe. Every one of us are essential pieces to the puzzle. And with just one piece missing, the full picture isn't complete. You see, this is what Christ is trying to tell you in many different ways. He says it in so many different ways. He's trying to explain it, and still nobody's getting it. They're like, what? What are you saying? In fact, many people that maybe slightly get it, they get perturbed, and to the point that so frustrated and offended that they nail him on a cross. You see, ultimately. So verse 68, continuing the same stream of thought. Congratulations to you when you are hated and persecuted. Christ knows that when you live out the essence of your truth, and you're going to know that because that truth cannot be something that harms other people. You see, because remember what it talks about. It talks about not just loving yourself and God, but others as well. You can't just take one commandment or one verse or one spiritual law and say, oh, there it is, I got it. No, you have to take them all together. They all work in unison, and one cannot be without the other. So whatever you're going to do, whatever your contribution is, it has to be from the essence of you. It can't be borrowed or parasited off of other people. So Christ says, congratulations to you when you are hated and persecuted, and no place will be found wherever you have been persecuted, because you don't need to find a place. The place is already found, and it's within you. You see, when you've arrived at that place, when everything outside of you has abandoned you, that's your opportunity to go within and recognize the place you're looking for has always been within you. 69, Jesus said, congratulations to those who have been persecuted in their hearts. They are the ones who have truly come to know the Father. That's a lonely place to be, isn't it? When your heart is broken. But it's also the beginning of salvation, because it's at that time you realize that nothing in this world is going to mend that heart, except that only the heart can mend itself. And the heart is within you. You know, it's you. So only you can find that fullness. You can't rely on others, because your walk is unique to you. And no matter what you do to search for a place for someone else to completely get or understand you or agree with you, you're not going to find it. Now, there are those that might get 90% there, but they have their unique walk. That's that utterly empty place that Sophia sought after. What was God like in the beginning? Well, he was utterly alone. So too, Sophia had to be utterly alone. So too, all of us that are seeking God within us have to be alone in that experience, because we have a unique contribution to the whole, and it's unique to us. We have to learn to love that silence and that emptiness, because it's that emptiness and silence that we can feel. Without it, there would be no place to feel ourselves into. That's why a lot of people are looking outside themselves, because they can't handle looking inside themselves for the truth, to feel that emptiness. So they look elsewhere to fill that space, because they can't handle, because a lot of people don't realize that that emptiness, that silence, is God allowing you to fill that space. Okay, this is why people reject it. That's why they rejected the Christ. And so it goes on and says, 69, and it continues, it says, congratulations to those who go hungry, so the stomach of the one in want may be filled. And here Christ is talking about when you finally get to a place where this world not only abandoned you, but also to the point at which you feel like the world cannot bring you a sensation of fullness, then you have arrived, because then you either will die or live. And if you can't understand the truth of your purpose here and your contribution and how integral and important you are, then you may die. You'll be more likely to die. But if you understand how integral and important you are and how unique you are, and you're a keystone, and that there is more to this realm than the physical things that you see and the consumption and the bartering that you can offer, not just to yourself, but everyone, and the afterlife, then you'll understand that you have a place here, no matter what's going on around you. And then it culminates here in 70. Jesus said, if you bring forth what is within you, what you have will save you. If you do not have that within you, what you do not have within you will kill you. This is perhaps, in my opinion, the most profound verse in the Gospel of Thomas. Here, Christ is literally telling you, you have to live your truth or it will destroy you. There's so many different ways to think of this. Maybe you're in a corporate job because of the money, the reputation, because of the prestige, or what the parents expect from you, or what your friends expect from you, or what your image. But deep down inside, your spirit is literally eroding every day. You're dying. You hate going to work. You feel nauseous getting up. That's one example, you see, that you're literally killing yourself by not living your truth. Maybe your truth is to, I don't know, become a librarian, or become a person that goes to travel the world and does a vlog, for example. All of the money you can gain, all of the things you can consume, the big houses and the cars, the prestige and the popularity, none of that matters if you're not happy on the inside. Is what Christ is telling you. And why is that? Because within you is a beckoning, a calling to find your name. And no matter how you try to silence it, it's not going to go away. And if you live in this realm and you never fulfill that voice, yeah, you're going to come back. You're not going to go back to the pleroma until such time you have Gnosis, you accept you're worthy to receive the goodness, all the goodness the Father grants you, and then you do the work to find your name and live out the fullness of who you are. Because when you find the goodness of yourself, the truth, then at that point, that truth becomes you, and you become it, and thereby you are in the pleroma, which is all goodness and all truth. So you can't trick yourself. You've got to find your calling, got to find your name, and that is going to bring you toward bliss, is what Christ is talking about. If you bring forth what is within you, what you have will save you. The only thing that's going to save you, remember, the only unforgivable sin is to sin against yourself. The only thing that's going to save you thereby is you living your truth. And there's so many examples of that, as I pointed out. Whether you're marrying the wrong person, whether you're told you're supposed to be this sexuality or that sexuality. If you're this sexuality and you're living a lie in another sexuality, you're going to kill yourself. You need to come out and you need to live your truth and be proud of it. No matter what the world tries to tell you or try to sell you, or if you're following a religion that makes you feel empty on the inside. And there's all of these expectations of how you're supposed to live, whether it's wearing a certain this or doing a certain that, or putting bread a certain way, or you're not supposed to talk in the church. And deep down inside, you feel moved to become a female pastor, for example, or someone, a female that shares the glory of the Christ in His good news. But you're in a church that's stifling your voice, then that's going to kill you if you don't get out. And you're not going to go to heaven after death. In fact, you're going to come back to hell, which is this realm, because you haven't found your name. You haven't found truth. That's the only thing that's going to prevent you from going to the pleroma, is yourself, and that is not finding the truth of who you are and living that out. That's the only thing that's going to bring you to the pleroma, is living out your truth and not being bashful or ashamed to live it, or afraid to live it, or worried about things that don't matter, like your reputation or your prestige or whatever else, what other people think or expect that you're supposed to be, your church father or your parents or your friends, so-called friends, so forth and so on. So those things don't matter to Christ. In fact, He's not worried about what you're not supposed to be or supposed to be. He's not even worried. In fact, He's supporting you to be who you are already from the beginning. Listen to yourself. The truth is in you, okay? So just live it out. Don't be ashamed. Don't be afraid. Verse 71, Jesus said, I will destroy this house and no one will be able to build it. And of course, the only one that will build it is Himself. And here you could be thinking about the temple that He tore down, right? And then 3 days I'll rebuild it. And yes, you can refer to that if you like. But ultimately, He's saying the only person that can destroy and rebuild it would be Himself, or you. You're the only one that can destroy your house. The temple of God is you, right? Spirit of God is within you. The kingdom of God is within you. Therefore, the temple of God is the body, which is you. You are the temple of God. And the only one that can destroy that temple is you, by not living out your truth. Save yourself from the lie the world has told you. And 72, and a person said to him, tell my brothers to divide my father's possessions with me. He said to the person, Mister, who made me a divider? So Christ is saying that I'm not about division. I'm not about judging and condemning. I'm not the one that is concerned about material things and this goes this way and that goes like that. I don't make these kind of decisions. The only one that makes these kind of decisions is you. You get to decide if you're going to be a divider or not. Or are you going to be whole? Don't divide up what the Father has given you. Be the fullness of who you are. And He turned to His disciples and He said to them, I'm not a divider, am I? And this is very crafty of Christ, because He's literally kind of putting in their face like He knows what's going to happen. He knows they're going to eventually create factions against one another. They're going to end up dividing from each other. So He's asking them, I'm not a divider, am I? So He's telling them, if you have to go out and talk about dogma and don't eat this meat or don't dress this way or don't do this or don't do that. Of course, Paul is one of the ones that is very quintessential example of that one of the great dividers of Christ's message, in fact. And we're going to learn this later. Paul is one of the ones that brought a lot of misinformation about what James originally set forth, which is the pure form of Christ's message. James interrupted and brought in all kinds of seeds of division that led to many different churches and factions. And you can see the results of that today, where there's all kinds of dogma and putting to naught Christ fulfilling the law once and for all for everyone to free us from that kind of silliness. So this world that we're living in is the world of division. So anytime you have boundaries, whether it's borders between nations or countries, between sexes, between young and old, and Democrat versus Republican, this ethnicity, that race, this group versus that group, this religion, that religion, those are things that are causing this world to literally destroy itself. That's what Christ is saying, ultimately. I'm not a divider. That's not my message. That's not what I came here to do. But I'm going to leave it up to you to take what I've said and make of it what you will, because I know you will. Make of it whatever you will. But he already answered that. He said to the person, Mister, who made me a divider. In fact, he's saying to them, the only one that has taken my message and corrupted it is you. You have corrupted it. You made me into a divider. I didn't make myself into a divider. Now, I certainly am telling you that ultimately my message will divide people, but not because that was my intention, but because I know what you as humans intend to do with my message. You see? All right. So that's really what we ultimately have to get to. We have to get away from the world of consumerism, identity to our consumption, and identity to identity. Because the only identity we have ultimately is human being. We're all human beings with the Spirit of God in all of us. We only need to recognize the beauty of that and love each other as Christ asks us to do. And love God as we love ourselves with all our mind and heart. And we can only love God as much as we love ourselves, and love others as much as we love ourselves. That's the ultimate message here, and that we're worthy to receive the good news that we already are worthy and made complete and whole from the beginning. And that it was the demiurge that came along and divided everyone and created this idea of good and evil, left and right, and these factions. And that's why it continues to create mayhem and division and wars and suffering and death in this realm that we live in. It's the nature of this realm. It's a parasite. It's a world that wants to constantly hide away the truth, to keep you in the dark from the goodness within you. And so that's our work, is to spread the good news and to keep it alive and have it grow so that we may make earth as in heaven, on earth as in heaven, you see. And that power is within all of us to do. But we all have to do it here first, and then from there we can grow outward. With that, thank you for listening, and pick up on video 8, verse number 73.